Hey juniors, it's Sunday. I wanted to give you guys some reading notes and post some questions to you about chapters 50 through 59 of Inferno. So you'd be ready for this week if I asked you some questions about this last week's reading. I'm going to do this kind of like I did the last time, and as long as you can answer the questions that I go over, you should be good to go. Okay, so the first thing that's really important is in these chapters, Sienna and Robert start discussing Bertrand Zobrist in more detail. Okay, so the very first thing in chapter 50 that's discussed in connection to him is an essay that he wrote, where in this essay he wrote that doctors needed to stop extending human life through medication and rehabilitative services, things like that, because he said that humans would actually die sooner and it would help control the population better, okay? And he also stated that his genetic engineering, along with other genetic engineers, should use their abilities to find what, instead of a cure for disease, they need to find what. You need to be able to answer that question. Also, he talked about in this essay that world leaders were in extreme denial of the situation at hand with human population. As Robert and Sienna are discussing this, and really Sienna's doing most of it because she's obviously read this essay and she knows a lot about Bertrand Zobrist for some reason. Robert stops her in the middle of it and says, "Whoa, you seem like you're a fan of his." And she says, "No, I'm not a fan of his, but I am a fan of what?" You need to be able to answer that question. They give a really interesting analogy during this chapter, and it's in chapter 50, and it's a mythological analogy of the Apollo and Dionysus, those two Greek gods. I want to know what that mythological analogy has to do with the healthcare system as they're discussing it here in the book. Okay, you need to be able to know that. Next thing is, Sienna does find out she doesn't find out, she remembers what the name of the essay was that Zobrist wrote, and it was "Who Needs Agathusia?" Okay. It does say what agathusia is in the novel, but the entire title is a play on words, and you need to know how it's a play on words and what Zobrist was really meaning by it, and who he is specifically targeting in this title. They do talk about how Sienna is obviously bald. We figured that out in chapter 49 when they disguised themselves and she kind of ripped off her wig, and Robert found that out. You need to know why she's bald. They come to the outside of Beatrice Portinari's tomb, and remember, Beatrice Portinari was the woman who Dante Alighieri was in love with. However, she did not repay that love. She did not feel the same way about Dante as he did about her. And they're outside of Beatrice Portinari's tomb, and this is really interesting because, like I've talked about in class, all of this is real. All of this is in Florence, Italy. You can go see this. Hopefully someday you all get to go see this. But what is outside of Beatrice Portinari's tomb? I want to know what's outside of it, and I want to know what people can put in this object. All right, just kind of interesting. All right, Canto 25. We need to know that Canto 25 is obviously very important. The last thing Ignazio Busoni said to Robert in that voicemail was, Paradise 25, the gates are open to you, and Robert realizes Paradise 25 is actually Canto 25 of the Divine Comedy, and you need to know, how does Robert get to read it? He can't remember, obviously, the entire canto off the top of his head, so he does manage to find a way to read this, and I want to know how he does that. After reading this, where does Robert think the mask is hidden? You need to know that. 2 words, okay? There's a B and an F. Those are the initials of the 2 words. You need to know what those 2 words are. What secret did Ignazio share with Robert about the gates of paradise that many people don't know when they glance at them, and this is still true to this day about these gates of paradise, which is really referring to the doors into this certain place. The baptistry of San Giovanni is where the font is at. And I want to know, they talk about when you go into this baptistry, and still to this day you go into the baptistry, they say that people cannot help looking up. So I want to know what the decor is inside of the baptistry of San Giovanni and why it's like this, why these are the murals depicted, and why during a baptism did they feel this was so important to depict this art in the baptistry. Here they do find the mask. This is a huge, huge deal. They find the mask. So Sienna and Robert turn the mask over, obviously, hoping that there's some hidden message or hidden secret there. And at first they see nothing, but then they see really faintly 7 P's. And it tells you that the 7 P's do stand for, or 1 P stands for peccatum. And you need to know what that word means. And there's 7 of these, okay? So obviously they can make the connection that these 7 P's maybe also relate to the 7 deadly what? We have learned about these. You probably, when I said that, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. You need to know those. Then, as they're looking at the back of the mask, they figure out that the mask is covered in something specific, which Sienna smells it, and she recognizes the smell. Robert tells her what it is. Starts with a G. You need to be able to know what that is. This certain chemical or whatever this is water soluble. So they start to wash the inside of the mask, and when they do wash the inside of the mask, what do they uncover? You need to know that. In this passage that they uncover, but you need to know which specific one it is, they find out that what they're looking for is obviously underground. You need to know what is said in this passage that's found on the back of the mask that lets them know that the item they are looking for is found underground. Then, at the end of chapter 59, which you're going to read about him just a little bit in these chapters off and on, but we do find out in chapter 59 the man with the rash is still following Robert and Sienna. How did he get into the baptistry before it was open? He did do something so he could get entrance in there before it was open to the public, because he knows Robert and Sienna are inside. And then when he does come inside, where do Robert and Sienna hide? And then, surprisingly enough, the man addresses Robert by name at the end of the chapter. Okay, so that's basically everything, chapters 50 through 59. Make sure that you can answer those questions that I've asked you in these notes, and you will be good to go this week when I do ask you some of those in another Google Doc. I really appreciate you guys getting on the Google Doc this last week and answering your one question. I know it takes a little bit of time, but one question's not too bad, and I really appreciate you all getting on there. Hope you have a great Sunday, and I hope you have a great week. I'll see you guys later. Bye.